City of Salem, Massachusetts, the City Council Committee on Administration and Finance, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met in the Council Chamber on Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the fiscal year 2025 operating budgets and capital improvement plans for the City Clerk's Office, the City Council, and the Salem Public Schools. Notice of this meeting was posted on May 22nd at 3:54 p.m., and this meeting is being recorded. Joining us tonight from the Administration and Finance Committee, we have Councilors Stott, Councilor Jerslow, Councilor Varela, and Councilor Prosnewski. And from the Committee of the Whole, we have Councilors Morcillo, Councilor Cohen, and Councilor Davis. Also joining us tonight is Eileen Simons, our City Clerk, our Superintendents of Schools, Dr. Zreich, and Elizabeth Pauley. She's here. Great, and welcome everyone. These public meetings are for financial review of best practice and to learn about the departments and how they utilize funds. To view the full budget, please go to salem.ma.gov/FY25. And the homepage also includes, towards the bottom of the mayor's statement, a link to the budget in brief, which is a very helpful summary. And when you come up to present, please tell us about what your department does, anything you'd like to highlight, and any significant changes in your budget, and also any capital projects you'd like to discuss. I'd also like to mention the CIP by department are in the larger tab section 7 in the front of the book, and I will also reference the page by section in that section for the 5-year capital plan when we move on to discussing that. Okay, and first we have the City Clerk with us for the City Clerk's Office, and that is in Section 2. It starts on page 311, and the budget summary is on page 314. Sorry, I have one other acknowledgement to make. Joining us via Zoom is Councilor Watson-Felt. And please let us know, Councilor, if at any point you can't hear anyone on Zoom. That would be helpful. Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Varela. Thank you, everyone. So first we have Eileen Simons.
Good evening, everyone. We're starting with the City Clerk Department. Is that what you had said, Councilor Merkel?
Yes.
Okay. So, any questions? So, pretty much my salaries are level funded except for our union, the increase that the union and their step gets them. And I believe Mayor Pangallo had circulated, is that correct? So, and we have received an email from Mayor Pangallo about comparative salaries, and they were, some positions were lower among the communities than others. So one of the differences that you'll see in the city clerk's salary line is for the assistant city clerk. Instead of the 2.5, that went up by 4%. So that is one of the differences that you're going to see from the department request. And the expenses has not changed. That's staying the same level funded as last year, as fiscal year 24.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Any questions from the council? Councilor Masillo?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple questions. On one of the budget items is an overtime, $4,000. Can you speak to what that's specifically for?
Yes, that's for the overtime for the union people that are out in my room 3 office. So that would be for any, this year we used probably more than that was allotted because I had people out on leave, on medical leave, and we've been kind of juggling around. So it's any time that they that they stay to catch up on marriage licenses or getting things ready for the month to send to the state. If there's always something that if we're down a person, they might stay longer or work through their lunch and just, you know, and then leave at 4. So it just depends how busy the office is at that point.
Okay. Actually, that was helpful what you just said. So what are you have to do monthly reports to the state?
Yes, for our vital records.
So all of them, marriage, birth,
And deaths, yes.
and deaths. Right? Okay. So next year, and we talked about this previously with the mayor's department also, I would love to see in your goals and objectives something about customer service, something about the level of support that you're providing for, you know, obviously exceptional customer service, because it is a customer service department, right? You're dealing with the public all the time. And even though you kind of talk around that, my opinion is that needs to be pulled out more in the city departments. Just to, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you gave an example. I'm a little confused to what you're saying.
So I think that the mayor's office with constituent services, I think the city clerk's office with people coming in to get records, and to file things, to get permits, all the interactions that you do are customer facing, right? Citizens are, yeah. So I just, it's my opinion, and the mayor can take this, but I would love to see in one of your goals and objectives to focus and to call out a level of customer service. And also, hopefully the city will do some sort of a program to get feedback on customer service, because I think it's really important as residents coming in, and it's not just your department, it's everyone, it's engineering, it's everybody, to just keep in mind the customer service aspect of the job. That's all.
Do that every second of every day.
I understand.
So I understand. I mean, even when it's not related to our office, everybody stops in. So I guess I'm just not understanding, like, they answer the phones, they help every customer, they spend time with them, look over records. So,
Yep. Go ahead.
Yes, Mayor Pangallo.
Thanks. So we had talked about you at a previous ANF meeting. So just to kind of fill in from that, I think what we're talking about is 2 different types of ways of tracking customer service. One is satisfaction of people that have come into the office looking for assistance, whether that's through immediate response, feedback request, or if it's a survey that's done afterwards to people, or a sample of people that may have interacted with the city. I think the other way we judge customer service is responsiveness. So in the mayor's office metrics, we include the number of business days to respond to somebody and the number of business days to close. So what I would love to get to with departments is establishing service level agreements around responsiveness and satisfaction. I think it's going to vary widely by department and by the type of service that's being requested. So before we can I don't want to say everybody's going to get their service response within 1 business day. Sometimes if a department needs more time, or if it's a complicated matter, they might need more days. So I think understanding first what that baseline target is, and then setting the goal, and then obviously trying to always improve on that goal. But those are the 2 ways that we're looking at thinking about how to measure customer service levels, satisfaction, and timeliness.
Thank you, Mayor Pangallo. And also, I had mentioned the department heads that are presenting tonight in attendance, but I certainly want to acknowledge Mayor Pangallo and also our Finance Director, Anna Friedman, as well. Councilor Posnewski.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I think with the promise of the new website being redesigned, it's going to take a lot of confusion out of how people get answers. I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons that we get customer service complaints is because people just don't know where to go and how to do it. And then, of course, they walk into City Hall and the very first door that they come upon is Madam Clerk's, and she has to play traffic cop in her office and answer questions that aren't even part of her responsibility. But my question to you, Madam Clerk, is I know that we've been talking about the election commission. The possibility of having that election commission come to fruition. And I'm just curious, are they going to fall under your budget, or is that going to be a separate department that's going to have its own budget? If they do fall under your budget, how's it going to impact? And if they don't, how is that going to impact?
I would leave that up to the mayor to respond to.
So I think the concept is it would be a separate budget. As how that would affect, I don't know that it would really affect this department budget. It would be in the elections and registrations, would effectively, as I understand it, become a separate department if that's what the council decided to do. I think there's still some questions around the budgetary structure that's going to take, how it's going to affect existing lines. So I think there's still some questions to be answered there, but my understanding is that it would be a separate department.
Thank you.
If I can go back to the customer
Yes.
service for a second, Councilor Marcillo, I also have very active bilingual person in that office who not only works a lot with birth records and affidavits because the hospital might not get all the information that they need, and they come in for affidavits in a very long process. And she spends a lot of time with them, especially in using her Spanish language, and anybody that just comes in looking for who to talk to, she also directs them. And there's certain cases that she spends a lot of time with people, especially if they don't speak English, that she tries to help out. And I had put in a stipend for her in my original budget that was zeroed out because of the new language program, and I guess we'll have to talk more about that.
Thank you. Councillor Stott?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Through you, I'm curious. Looking at the numbers, I see a trend up and a trend down in a few different licenses, which, as you say, is kind of the forefront of your customer service. I'm curious about the marriage licenses because I personally have seen an uptick. We had a story on the front page of this news last year of weddings on, I think it was Friday the 13th in October. So it is. I'm curious if we track data on not just marriage licenses, but marriages that we perform within City Hall, and if that number is increasing as well, and the time allowed that it takes to that, and who within the office can perform those. Do you have any of that available?
I don't have any of that available. In terms of in City Hall, as from our position, where the city clerk and the assistant city clerk are allowed to become justice of the peace. There's it's not considered double dipping. Anytime, like when it becomes Halloween or that Friday the 13th, I will be here, but I take a personal day to do something like that, and then I get work done in between. And if anybody wants to say that I might do, well, right now Maureen's out, so I have the brunt of them. But, if these people see me here late at night, 7:00 on the weekends, I certainly don't take away from my job that needs to be done by doing the weddings.
Thanks. If I may, so you kind of segued a little, but I'm definitely just curious in the data. Are you saying that you're not able to provide how many marriages you perform because it's done off time?
No, it's just done on a software, and we don't track that, and the software can't pull up from the officiant to give a report on that.
Because I do appreciate your desire and your extreme, finding the importance of completing your work and making sure that that's all done. But time, as I say this every year, time is a finite thing. There's only so much of it. And I just would get concerned that, especially with, like you said, the brunt of it being on you now, there's only 24 hours in a day and you can't be working all of them. And then just with the increase, I am really curious if people are traveling to Salem specifically to get married within City Hall and what those implications are upon your workload, whether or not it is done off the clock, which I know it's not done, quote, on the clock, but that's still a workload that is impacted.
I mean, for many, yeah. I mean, like I said, for many, I'm here late every night, and many nights. I'm here on the weekends. I come in. So I don't think for the 15 minutes or so that it might take me to do a wedding, that I certainly take anything away from working from the city in terms of giving to my job.
Councilor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Merkel, through you to our city clerk. I just had a quick question about the marriage licenses as well as the dog licenses. Obviously, it's an expenditure or an expense of your office. Concerning those licenses and the dog licenses and the marriage licenses, do those go right into the general fund, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess my question would be, how much revenue are we making? Does it even out? Is it level funded? Are we making a little bit of revenue off of the dog and marriage licenses, or?
We would have to do some calculations on that. I mean, like, marriage license of $40, so marriage license. And most of them can get done with our online marriage application. Most of that work can be done by the couple, and then they just come in and we print it out and go over it with them. And there's a fee of $40 for it and the $500. But I have never calculated their hours and minus that for the time that it took to fill out a license.
Gotcha. Thank you. I guess because we're in these conversations of updating our fees, I just want to make sure that we're looking at that to make sure that we're not losing money and we're keeping up with the trend.
I think, just getting some fees from different communities. Some people just charge $25 to fill out a marriage license. Some charge $50. So I think we're in a good ballpark there. In the past, we tried to raise the dog fees, and that was not very well supported. I don't know if you have anything else on that.
Thank you.
So just to give some figures on licenses that are brought in through the city clerk's office, this year, the clerk's office has brought in $141,000 worth of licenses, but that's not just for those two types. Those are all sorts of, they all go into one line. So we'd have to export it and try to filter it to do some deeper analysis on that. But that's all the license money, any other revenues that are coming in directly through the clerk's office. That's the total so far this year. And last year was around 154,000 last year. So.
Thank you. Appreciate those numbers. And also, I appreciate the many conversations we've had and the importance, Councilor Varela, too, of that we're looking at all the fees to see if they're in line with what it actually costs us in resources with the city in general throughout the department. So appreciate that. I also would just like to check with Councilor Watson in attendance that I can see if you raise your hand. I haven't seen one, and then I can hear you. So I just wanted to ask you if you could do a raise hand or chime in.
Sure.
Just so that
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Sure.
Okay, you want to try us again?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great.
Thank you. Thank you for checking. I'm really appreciating the conversation, all the questions asked so far. I have nothing additional at this time. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Down. Okay, are there any other questions from the council? No? Okay. So the budget summary is on page 314 for the city clerk's office. Councilor Stott?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I move for recommendation of approval of the city clerk's budget for the personnel line of $360,292, the expenditure line of $13,870 for a department total of $374,162.
Second.
Thank you. Councillor Stott moves to recommend approval of the personnel budget for the city clerk's office in the amount of $360,292 and the expenditures budget in the amount of $13,870 for a total department amount of $374,162, seconded by Councillor Prosnewski. All in favor? Let the record show. I see 4 hands plus my own. So this carries 5-0. And thank you. Now we will move on to in section 2 of the City Council. It starts on page 303 with the budget summary on 306. And yes, and this is also Eileen Simons. Thank you.
So, like my last budget, the salaries and the expenses are level funded, and there's been no changes from fiscal year '24.
Yes, Ms. Friedman.
Just to add one note, because this, I think, sometimes can look a little confusing depending on the year, but because we have 52, we have an extra day of pay on our payroll cycle in FY25. So if you were looking at the city councilor salaries, they look a little higher than they otherwise would. We just have to ensure that we capture that day in the payroll. Those aren't actual changes to any salaries. It's just capturing that extra payroll day. Last year was exactly 52 weeks, so we didn't have that issue last year.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Any questions from the council? Okay, Councillor Stott.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I believe, is this the, yes, this is the budget because they're kind of separated by 3, the one that we added the new minute taker line to. And I know you and I have had a few conversations about this, that I am curious again. I'm going to say the same comment. Time is finite and we're staying after hours to perform weddings and do all the extra work and minute taking. Is that only to be completed within the department, or are we able to put that out to others?
Be more than happy to put it out. There was a situation with the minute taker, and I'd rather talk offline about that than here in the chambers. But I have somebody from another office doing actually these budget meetings because our past budget clerk had passed away not too long ago. So, and then I am also having that same person try to pick up some of the other minutes that we have from last year, try to do, and then she was going to look them over and try to condense them a little bit more. But this is open, and my goal is to talk to our HR manager about trying to find somebody that might like to do this for us, whether they're an employee here or somebody new that just wants some, hours on their own that they can listen to the Zoom recording and the transcript.
Thank you for that. So I appreciate that. I think similar to how like the boards and commissions put a posting out, it's a great part-time night job. You just listen to this because I have done it so much myself. You just listen to the Zoom meeting. I'm just hoping if you could explain for my knowledge and memory what these additional stipend lines are for clerk of the council, clerk of committee, assistant clerk. Obviously, budget clerk and minute taker are pretty specific for minute taking for the committee meetings, I'm assuming. What are the additional 4,500 and 4,000?
Those are stipends that have existed for quite a while, and some of them are part of Mass General Law to be the clerk of the council, such as myself, and the clerk of committee. The assistant city clerk is getting that stipend that has been in perpetuity for posting the minutes and setting up the committee minutes and posting the website and the meeting notices and such.
Councilor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Merkel, through you to our city clerk. Just going through the goals and objectives, I'm happy to see that at the top of the list is the implementing of the agenda software by July 1st, 2024. Since July is very close, what is the actual timeline for implementation of agenda software at this point?
Well, you can join me. I have a person coming in from Civic Plus tomorrow and Thursday for on-site training. And hopefully from there, it will be all hands go. My goal. It's been, so.
That's great news. Good to hear. Councilor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair Merkel, not being a member of the committee, through you to the city clerk. One of the goals, I think it was the same goal last year, was to have translation. I know we can all do better. We don't really have a lot of participation at our meetings for people who don't speak English, Spanish being their language. So could you update us on what the status of getting translation is?
Well, I started to research that a little bit more after our March meeting in the mayor's office. I did reach out to, I think, Anna, did you tell me the sustainability department? Was it you that told me that in March? No. And I went over to see what that vendor was, and it was, they only used them once, and I guess it was, I just couldn't find them. So, and I know the school committee does it, and I think somebody, it's an actual person that they paid to do it. I'm trying to find a little bit more of a professional way of doing it with a person or a larger company, but, costs aren't cheap.
Just to follow up on that, Rahina, as part of the wage theft ordinance, facilitated 2 trainings. They were online webinars, and there was a translation that people could dial into, and I think it was very positive.
Is it part of the Zoom?
Yep.
Well, yeah. I haven't been able, I want to test that, but I haven't been able to.
I think that would be helpful. I know, and I want to go back to minutes. I chair the Public Health, Safety, and Environment Subcommittee, and we had a couple of pretty long meetings about the camping ordinance. And I'll just say that because of the disability that I have, I can't actually pay attention watching a meeting and taking notes. So I really relied a lot on trying to take notes while I was doing the meeting. And I did submit minutes to you for both meetings. But I do feel like I'm only speaking for myself. I can't say I'm speaking for other people who chair committees. But I know that, it does take a little bit away from running the meeting when you're trying to facilitate the technical stuff, which is complicated, and the minutes. So I'm hoping at some point that the minute taking will be more of a function like it is in other boards.
That's go. That's the goal. Like I said, I was meeting with the HR manager. I'm going to put it out there to see if anybody wants to do it, whether internally or externally.
Yeah, I mean, I've chaired 2 boards in the city, and I always refuse to do minutes because I think it's the hardest job during the meeting. So, and a lot of times it's good to do meetings if possible, like we have zoning board or others, because you get a different flavor when you're actually in person at the meeting. I do want to express a concern about the communication with the city council. And I don't think it's appropriate for the clerk to ask employees of the clerk's office to leave the office and lock the door and reprimand a city councilor. I don't think it's appropriate to assign a resolution to someone who is not the person who should be reading the resolution. And I don't believe it's appropriate for the city clerk to follow a city councilor out to the street to my car and ask me if I have a problem with something on the agenda. And I'm just expressing that to you. You don't have to respond, but I think
Respond.
I'm not done yet. Thank you. I'm expressing a concern. I don't want to be interrupted until I'm done. I feel like, I go into the city council. In the past, I've had a good relationship with everyone in the department, and I don't really personally feel that safe and comfortable going into that room anymore. And you can respond, but I feel like this behavior is inappropriate for anyone who works for the city.
Are you done? May I respond now? First of all, I don't know what you mean by locking the door and reprimanding someone. I don't recall that. I do recall walking out to ask you if there was an issue with the agenda. I had told you on Tuesday evening that I put in a resolution for the Jewish American Heritage Month, and that I asked Council Prosnewski to bring it in for me because I didn't see any resolution from you. There would not have been a resolution from you had I not even put that on the agenda. But you had the authority, and you used your position as a counselor to strike down almost all the paragraphs that I had there. That was something from Congress that I was using and trying to take out everything that was politically related. And then you had put in things about, Mayor Zoll, which was great, and Michael Corley, which is great. And if you want to talk about being insulted for not to have the first female Jewish city clerk being Eileen Simons as one of the people that you did not mention in the resolution, this would have came and gone had I not even brought anything in on the agenda for you to eviscerate it. So I don't know what you're talking about. I heard that you were taking it over. I told you had no problem with Council Prosnewski bringing it in for me. And if you had something to say to me, you could have said it to me personally. If I questioned your Jewishness, if you took that as when I was walking down the stairs, I said it to you, not in the chamber. You could have came and told me yourself and not hide behind the microphone.
Okay, so I am going to request this.
Point of order. I'm going to respond to that. I think I have a right to do that. When I was in your office a few months ago,
I think it should be. This is. I appreciate both of you expressing. Concern about this. I think moving forward, the conversation should continue, but I would request some guidance on that being in a different venue, since this is off topic from the budget hearings that we are here to discuss. So I do appreciate both people who are engaging in this being able to express, and I think it should be continued in a different format. I welcome any other counselors if they are not okay with that. Otherwise, I'll move forward. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other budget-related questions? Councilor Prosnewski.
I agree, Councilor Merkel. I think we should just stay on topic and stay with the budget, because that's where we're supposed to be at right now. The concerns are genuine. They're important. I just don't think that this is the venue to be exercising our ability to speak. I don't think it. There's an old saying: you praise in public and you discipline in private, and I think that that's due here. We should be talking in a different venue about what's going on here, and not letting it slide, but just in a different venue at this point. So we'll just move to stay on topic, and maybe Councilor Stott can weigh in on the approval of the budget. Thank you.
I'll just weigh in that I do appreciate public dialogue as well, but I think we will move on if anyone has any further budget-related questions. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Through you to our city clerk. I had a question about the software support enhancements. Has the agenda software been accounted for that in this 2025?
Yes. The 12,000. is it the, sorry.
12,820.
12,820, yes.
So that $8,000 discrepancy, is that, what was the change in that from 2024 to going forward?
Some of that was for the part of the training.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more questions from the counselors, Counselor Stott.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I move to recommend adoption of the City Council budget personnel line of $179,337 and the City Council expenditure line of $78,962 for a department total of $258,299.
Second.
Counselor Stott moves to recommend approval of the personnel budget for the City Council in the amount of $179,337 and the expenditures budget in the amount of $78,962 for a City Council department total of $258,299. All those in favor? Okay, let the record show. I see 4 hands plus my own. So this matter carries 5-0. And last we have here with our city clerk is still in section 2, elections and registrations, which starts on page 317, and the budget summary is on 321. And I will also say for the previous departments discussed, and this one, there are no capital projects, so that's why this hasn't been discussed. We do have some for the schools that are coming up, but not at this time.
There was one I put in that I think Anna and I were going to talk to afterwards for something.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, elections and registrations. Thank you, City Clerk.
All right. So again, on the salary line, you're going to see an increase of probably 4% over last year's fiscal budget, and that was another position that I guess the comparative salary survey that the city did showed that should be a little higher. So that's where the 4% difference comes in from that on that salary line. And the expenses stayed the same from last year. And if anybody wants an update on the search for another assistant, last week? I lose track of time, sorry. We had 3 interviews set, the HR manager and myself. The first one, the person we couldn't hear her through the Teams meeting. So I had set up a Zoom meeting for the next day in the afternoon, and before we had a chance to do that, she withdrew her name. And then there was 2 interviews for the following day, and another person withdrew their name, and the third interview, who I was looking forward to interviewing with, didn't show up at all and didn't call. So that's, and then I do have one more interview on Thursday evening, about at 6, I believe. There's been a lot of openings in city clerks' offices, whether city clerk, assistant city clerks, election people, especially. Since 2020, a lot of those city clerks have retired and have moved on. so we're all kind of pulling from the same pool of candidates. Gloucester had an assistant open. Peabody has an assistant open. They just keep coming. So keep trying.
Thank you. I was going to mention at the end of this one, it is appreciated that we know your departments are down staff, and people have had to work, really hard, and it is noticed and appreciated. Thank you, including you. Okay, Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Through you to our city clerk. Obviously, our elections department right now is a little slim. When it comes to the assistant clerk salary requested for 2025 at 69,214. Is that consistent with what would be out there? I mean, maybe that's one reason that we can't find someone, that the salary might be a little low.
Well, that 69, that came up from 66 from fiscal year 24. I believe that's the 4% instead of 2.5% to try to raising that position. Maybe the mayor can speak more on that salary survey. I just know just because of a local communities looking like Gloucester's pay was like 89,000, but Peabody's like 56. So it's, it would be nice if it could go up more, but, I'm going to work within the parameters that I have. But we know how much it takes sometimes to keep changing the salary.
Mayor Pangallo?
Thanks. I can speak. This is probably an opportunity to, not specific to the clerk's department, but I think I mentioned maybe in a message to the council that our approach with our exempt employees this year, we've engaged with a compensation consultant to do, we typically do in-house, we do our own salary survey each year. This year we decided to do something a little bit more robust, looking a little bit more in-depth, and it's going to hopefully result in a classification report that will help us understand what the appropriate compensation level for each salary, for each position should be. So this is unrelated to the individual in the position, purely based on the job description, the title. And our goal, which is the 4% that the city clerk mentioned, is that we're going to work on incrementally trying to move these positions to places where they're in a more competitive range. So in many places, it's just not financially possible for us to do this in 1 year. So all of our exempt employees receive the same COLA across the board. And then positions, not individual positions, where we identified that job was significantly below the range we wanted to be in, we're starting to move the needle towards getting there by adding an additional 0.5% to 1.5%, depending on how far below that range they are. And that's, I think, our goal going forward, is that when the study is complete, to have a better picture of where we want each position to be, and every year be able to keep moving those positions towards a competitive range as aggressively as possible, while also being mindful of the cost that it does require.
Thank you. Councilor Varela?
Thank you. If I may follow up, thank you for that, Mayor. As you are aware, we have the conversation of an elections commission, and if we do pass that, that'll be enacted in January 1st, 2025. So my question is, if we do pass something like this, are we going to be able to fully fund that department to be solvent, or is that going to be a headache for you? I'm sure it's going to be a headache anyways, but can we do it? Is it possible? Please don't veto something like that. That's.
I'm sorry. No.
So I think that's the big question that I think I know I've expressed to you, is like, we need to understand from the communities that have done this in other places, what does that look like from a budgetary standpoint? How does that relate to the existing budget in this department? And the positions in that department. So it could very well be generally budget neutral, that the cost of having, all we're doing really is making a structural change. But I would imagine that there's going to be some additional costs that I think we need to have a better understanding of before we get to January. And if we have to ask for a supplemental appropriation to accommodate that, just understanding what that's going to be.
And can I just follow up on that with you, Councilor Varela? I've been thinking about sort of like in a, I don't know, catch-22, you want to hire somebody now for new, but, the same thing, if they're changing to election commission, how do I, want to approach that with the new candidate, and that person's going to be it, or, so before we thought we had a person there that was going to transition, that didn't happen. So now I'm not so sure how to go down that path.
Thank you. And my last question is, I know we ordered the voting machines. When is that going to be in place? Is it optimistic to say that for the next election in November, we might have the new voting machines in?
They're being delivered June 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's exciting as well. So I see Anna first, Anna Friedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one note for the council in thinking about potentially funding some changes for the elections office to the extent that additional funding could be needed. Once the tax rate is set, which typically happens in early December, any supplemental budget, if one would be needed, would need to happen before that, because if any supplemental budget, we're not allowed to do a supplemental budget after that, and the funding for that would then have to come from one-time resources, which then creates a bigger challenge going into FY25. And then for there to be enough time to figure out what would be needed for a supplemental budget and then ensure that can be afforded and get that on our tax recap, there would need to be enough runway around that. So just a note about some timing considerations while that's being considered. If additional funding is needed, the supplemental budget would need to happen in advance of December to accommodate that if more funds were needed.
Thank you. Mayor Pangallo, did you have your? Oh, it was just waving me down for Anna. Okay. Yes, Councilwoman Marcillo.
Thank you, Chair. That's not a problem because it still has to go through the State House and we can set the date when it becomes effective. So there's room to figure this out. My question for Ms. Simons is, can you just help me understand for the number of absentee ballots processed and the number of vote by mail ballots mailed? Do you add those two up? And is that the total number that you send out paper-wise for elections? So it's the vote by mail and the absentee ballots?
They're actually in separate modules in our voter registration system, but in terms, so we try to keep them a little separate, but at the same time, they will, they can certainly be added together. And the reason we don't process as many absentee ballots is because under the state law, you still have to fall into those three reasons of why you can apply for an absentee ballot versus vote by mail for any reason at will.
Okay. So then the number of ballots returned was 1239, and that's both, right? That's inclusive of mail-in or absentee and vote by mail?
I don't have to double check my stats downstairs. I think it was.
I was just going to point out, I was always curious how many of those vote by mail ballots actually get sent in, and it looks like it's a pretty good number. It looks like it's when people ask for them, they actually do return them.
It's been increasing, yes.
Yeah.
I have those stats if you like to, I can send them to you, Councilor Marcillo, especially on the state side. The state keeps really great statistics on that. On the local side, it's a little bit more of labor of love. But until we get our new upgrade in our VRIS system, which was supposed to be this year, but I don't think that's going to be happening. So it's still sort of a manual adding and stuff, but I can certainly get you those for the 2020, 2022, 20, and then 24 when that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Merkel, through you to our city clerk. So I question, because I know you are the ex officio for the Board of Registrars. When it comes to expenditures of advertising, is your office thinking outside the box on how to get a little more voter engagement or try different ways to engage voters? I understand we have 33 active voters, but half a vote. So I guess my question is there a little more outreach expected or going forward to make sure that we have more voter engagement? Is that a
that have been part of my goals for a while. There's always always good to do a high school voter registration drive. I don't necessarily go out and do drives other than, high schools, if any. But in terms of, I put it on the website. I don't do too much advertising. Years ago, they used to come in the office and kind of do free press for us, but that certainly doesn't seem to happen anymore with a lot of the way the newspaper is run nowadays. But I would take any suggestions if you have any. I try to get it out there as much as I can. within the parameters of the law.
Any other questions for the city clerk? Yes, Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Merkel, not being a member of the committee, through you to the clerk. Understanding that you have 2 elections coming up and it's going to be difficult because of the staffing and how much more early voting days you have. I'm just projecting out to the future, just reinforcing what Councilor Varela said. One of the things that I think about when I go to the Saltonstall where I vote, and then sometimes I go to the Ward 1 at Lafayette Street. Do you feel like you have sufficient translators at the voting booth? Because I think sometimes that can be intimidating for a voter if there's not someone there.
We have somebody staffed usually in each location, maybe one if it's a double location, and I try to get them for an all day, whether it's 1 or 2. So, and we also have virtual poll workers where that we can, it's basically like talking to a real person and they're translating for you. I won't lie, it's sometimes difficult to get bilingual translators for each polling location at times. I'm going to be losing 4 of my high school students that are going to be graduating this year, and I've been trying to keep up with Miss Mansfield or one of the other teachers to try to get more, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, I just want to follow up and commend you on one thing that I think a lot of people don't know about. I know a few people who have disabilities, and really until they told me, how problematic it has been for them in the past, but you do have voting booths that can accommodate people with disabilities. So I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I think it's something that's a real positive, and I know a few people have mentioned it to me.
Do you mean just the booth itself or the automark, the machine, both? So yes, I mean, by law, we have at least one handicapped voting booth on each, if it's on each precinct. So we have that, and then the automark has been around for at least 10 years, I believe. And that allows people with visual, you don't have to be disabled to use them. Anybody can use them. So that somebody with disability with visual or hearing or even like that needs a puffer, that machine can handle all of that for them. And we also, in the state also has a Democracy Live, and we have, if somebody wanted an accessible ballot by mail, we provide that now.
Thank you. Any other questions from any of the councilors? Okay. Councilor Stott?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I move that we recommend with positive recommendation for the elections and registrations budget, personnel line of $257,197, expenditure line of $56,650, with a total department total of $313,847.
Second.
Thank you. Councilor Stott moves to recommend approval of the personnel budget for elections and registration in the amount of $257,197, and the expenditures budget of $56,650 for a department total of $313,847, seconded by Councilor Prosnewski. All in favor? Let the record show I see 4 hands plus my own, so this matter carries 5-0. And I want to say thank you to the city clerk. We appreciate your time here tonight and the work by you and your staff.
And thank you. And if any councilor has any further questions or want to follow up, I'd be more than happy to talk to you in the downstairs. Not now, but
Thank you. Also, we will take a break of a few minutes before we have the Salem Public Schools present the superintendent. And this is so we can set up a slide presentation that will be shown. And so just a few minutes and we will be back.
A minute recess.
Thank you. Motion, Councilor Stark motions for a 5-minute recess.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Varela. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. We are resuming with the budget hearings, and next we are going to hear from Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Zreich, and he is joined by Elizabeth Pauley, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, and we still have in attendance Mayor Pangallo and Anna Friedman, our finance director. And also, I didn't mention, we have Lisa Peterson, our chief of staff here in attendance as well. And welcome and thank you. And we are starting with a slide presentation, which covers it's a little different in the budget book for the Salem Public Schools. This is in section 4, which is it's part of the larger tab sections in the front. The school budget overview, which is a little different. And then what we vote on is section 26, which is a one-page, just a one-page section. And then we will move on to capital improvement plan, which there are several. So I'll reference that when we get that far. So we will start, with the slide presentation. And thank you.
Thank you for having me this evening. And I also just want to call out that school committee member Mary Manning is here. She is the chair of the finance subcommittee and has been very involved in the process all along. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Want me to repeat?
Sorry about that. Would you mind?
Oh, that's all right. Thank you for having me this evening. Always a pleasure to be in front of the city council. I do want to acknowledge that we're joined by Mary Manning, offers moral support as the chair of the finance subcommittee of the school committee, and appreciative that she's here. She's been with us along the way since we started the budget process way back in January. So I do want to start by just saying a couple things. One is I would love to come back to the city council to do a state of the schools as well, because I think there's a lot of questions you certainly can ask tonight, but I know there's others that, get at the work we're doing, and I would love to come back and at a time that's convenient for all of you to do a special presentation for the city council like we've done in the past before. This budget process this year was as complex a budget as I've done this is my 11th year as a superintendent, not all in Salem, but because of a confluence of different events, I do just want to share why this was a complex year. And you may tune into the news, you'll see that districts all over the state are struggling with their budgets. And there's 4 things that are at play for many districts, but certainly for us. One is the sunsetting of all the ESSER funds that we received during the pandemic. This is the final, we have to use them all by September. And so that we had that cushion and we were able to do additional work, important work on behalf of kids, like adding pre-K to our schools. And so there are a number of things that we could no longer sustain, but there were there's a lot of work positions, but also programs that we wanted to sustain. And so that had to come over to the operating budget. The second piece of it is, as you know, the cost of everything has gone up. So everything is costing us more. And those inflationary costs certainly are not keeping pace with the funding that we're receiving from the state. And so Elizabeth will talk more about, the cost of how the cost of doing business has gone up. We're also, as you may know, like many other districts around the state, we're in contract negotiations, which are with our largest union, our teachers union, which represents both teachers and paraprofessionals and support staff. And so we're in the midst of that. We had the plan for we don't know what that increase will be, but we had to plan for the fact that we will need to be more competitive with wages in the coming year. And finally, we've seen major shifts in demographics. And the good news is our enrollment has gone up in the Salem Public Schools for the first time in a long time. A lot of that was connected to increased high school enrollment, which it seems like more students and families are choosing Salem High School. But a lot of that is also driven by the migrants who arrived in Salem, and we welcome them. And that has added value, both enriched our system, but also has added financial value as well, because with additional students comes additional resources. But we've also seen an increase in the number of multilingual learners and students with disabilities. And so some of the adds that we've had to make, and justifiably, is to support the needs of our students who are learning English, which we've seen a 40% increase in multilingual learners in the last 2 years. And we've also seen an increase in students who have IEPs. A lot of that can be attributed to the pandemic, but we're also seeing more and more young students at age of 3 entering our system who have many more complex needs. And we, 2 years and months, we own the student, their IEP and their services. And so that brings with it, that's brought with it additional costs that, we certainly feel responsible and obligated, but that's also, you'll see that impacted in this budget as well. So our ask tonight is $74,592,616, which is a 4.83% increase from the year before. And we'll go into some more details. Now turning to the slides, when we build a budget in the Salem Public Schools, it is built on our values, which we feel very strongly about, belonging, equity, and opportunity. This is what this should underpin all the decisions we make, and that is connected also with our strategic plan. If you can go to the next slide. This is our mission statement and our vision statement as a school district. We feel very strongly about the idea that we're preparing young people for the world of college, work, and citizenship, and that we want them to have choices that they make for themselves, not choices that we make for them, but that they make for themselves. Next slide, please. We also have, again, connected to our value of equity. We feel strongly that decisions need to be made around equity, and that we have to make decisions that reflect, embrace the greater diversity of students and families, and that that we're allocating resources that so students, families, and staff who need the most get the most. And you'll see some of that reflected in this presentation. Next slide. We also have a brand new strategic plan, although it's a third of the way through because we just finished the first year of it. We're very proud of the plan, and it helped very much so this year to have a strategic direction with 4 core priorities and a series of initiatives aligned to each one of those priorities. And you'll see that the decisions, a lot of the choices that we made are aligned to our priorities, our goals, and the outcomes we've set for the school system. Next slide. Again, and this is just one page or a slide that shows how we want to be held accountable. This is what we call the measures of success, our North Star. In each one of the priorities, we have a series of outcomes. I'm looking forward to reporting out this summer on some of how we did after year 1. I feel like we have made some good progress in a lot of these places. Some places we're stuck. Other places we have, we've made a substantial progress in year 1. And so this is what we want to be held accountable towards. And again, how we use our resources must be aligned to these measures of success. Next slide. So our goals in this process that went into guiding this process is we always want to look at allocating our resources equitably. Not all schools, not all programs, not all have the same level of need, and we have to make sure we invest where the greatest needs are in the system. We talked already about aligning to our priorities and values. We work closely with the school committee to promote stakeholder engagement engagement. We did a lot of engagement in this process, like we have over the last few years. We had forums with the public, both on Zoom and in person, and we have Mary can tell you how many meetings we've had with our staff or each individual school community throughout the process, beginning in January. We do lean on our school leaders in the process. We want them to drive their recommendations, and by that, they also have school site councils. They have instructional leadership teams that help inform the process along the way. And then, we do obviously want to prioritize where the student and family needs are. Next slide. So community input, I'm not going to read this all to you, but we did, like I said, we had 3 different forums. We also surveyed folks along the way, and we asked them what are the most important initiatives in our strategic plan to fund and divert resources towards for each strategic priority in the upcoming year. I also, by now, have a nice cadence of meetings with different advisory groups. I have a student advisory, which is my favorite advisory group because they ask me the most difficult questions of any group, by far. I have a teacher advisory group. I have a parent advisory group. We meet with principals, and then obviously the school committee, finance committee, and then I have an executive team that meets. All of these folks have weighed in along the way. Next slide. I won't read this to you, but you can see these are the things that we heard from the community about what folks were looking for in each priority. And at my eye, I can't even read that anymore with my advanced age. But, we heard a lot from folks about, you can see color-coded based on things that we were already funding or have our sustained funding, and then new funding pieces as well. So a couple of things that I think are important to note is this budget does add additional funding for supporting multilingual learners and students with disabilities based on the demand in the district. We did make sure that the budget has a placeholder for trying to be as competitive as possible with neighboring districts and reviewing our salary schedule under priority 2, empowering educators. It also has additional supports in terms of professional learning for around supporting multilingual learners and students with disabilities. We did make sure that we expanded access to high-interest activities and programs. This is on the Centering Belonging. This sustains funding for our pre-K programs. It actually adds an additional pre-K class, a dual language pre-K class to Bentley School. Our budget also continues to sustain our investment in career and technical programs, early college, and then which are some of the highest interest programs. Also, I should mention the continued expansion of our dual language program at Bentley School. So all of that is, these are high interest, high demand programs and initiatives in the district that this budget continues to support. And then finally, one thing that we are adding that we think is important in this budget is we're in the process of phasing. We have library paraprofessionals, and we wanted to have full-time library media specialists in all our schools. So phase 1 begins this year with half of the elementary schools, and then the next half will be the following year. I will credit school committee member Manning, who's been a proponent of this for I don't know how long, but she's been, but we feel strongly that our libraries need to continue to be vibrant places, but we have a responsibility of teaching digital citizenship to young people, how to use media properly and appropriately, and we want to make sure all our libraries have a credentialed person. Doesn't mean that the people who are there now aren't excellent, but they're not trained as library media specialists. The only schools that have that right now are Salem High School and Collins Middle School. So that's that. This budget does include the resources to make that happen as well. Next slide. So
I just want to note a couple of other things that have come out in the conversations we've had. The access to pre-K has been nothing short of, I think, extraordinary for the district. The continued growth of the programs. Like I said, we're adding an additional pre-K next year, and the response from families has been incredibly positive, and we're starting to see the fruits of the work because our first graders now is the first group that had this expanded pre-K, and I think we'll see that in terms of outcomes, whether that be state outcomes or our internal assessments, that more and more kids are going to be on grade level and beyond because we're getting them at 4 years old, and so I'm pleased that this budget sustains that. I talked about multilingual learners and students with disabilities. This does also continue to support social, emotional, mental health supports. We are not making any adjustments to our mental health providers, our adjustment councils, and we're continuing to support Cartwheel, which is the telemental health program initiative that we started, that we've seen great success from. We are continuing to reimagine the middle school experience. We have funding from an outside partner to rethink middle school. Some of you know we have a pilot at Collins Middle School that includes 7th and 8th graders. Next year, all 8th graders in the Salem Public Schools will be part of that initiative. It's not a lottery. It's still a pilot because it's not the entire middle school, but it's all 8th graders at both Saltonstall and Collins. And we have seen some really, when I come back for the State of the Schools, I can share some more information about why that pilot has been very successful. I talked about the libraries. Salaries for teachers and paraprofessionals is critical. We are on the lower side as a district in terms of paying our employees, and that, obviously is a cause for concern if we want to keep the best and the most talented in the Salem Public Schools. And this budget also does continue to invest in our diversity, equity, inclusion work, which many of you know Laura Assad. She has done great work in building our affinity groups, we've more than doubled the number of teachers of color in the Salem Public Schools over the last few years. And that's a credit to the work that she has led in our HR department to try to match the demographics of our student population with our staff. More closely matched. We're not there yet, but more closely matched. Next slide. This is me still, right? So this is just our demographics. I do want to call out the growth in the percentage of multilingual learners. We've seen a major increase in the percentage of high need students, and then also an increase in unhoused students. That's not on this list, but we have seen a high increase in the number of homeless students over the last few years, which I don't think should be a surprise to any, as we've welcomed a lot of migrant families. But it's not just the families who are living at Salem State and the Bates Complex. The number of unhoused students has grown in scattered sites throughout Salem as well. And I think by mid-year we had surpassed our numbers from the previous year, which does drive up the cost of transportation, drives up the cost, mostly transportation, which has been a significant cost driver for the district. Next slide. And then this is just the enrollment trends. The good news is we're on an uptick. I hope that continues into next year. I'm a little worried about the migrant settlement. The complex, student families moving out of the complex for next year, because that could impact, or that should impact our enrollment unless the families stay in Salem, which we really hope they do, as many of them as possible. But our enrollment, we continue to see declines more at the middle school level and with birth rates at the elementary level as well. The high school numbers continue to grow, and we're back, close to 1,000 students at Salem High School, over 1,000 with the 3 campuses. But we were down to about 800 students 2 years ago at Salem High School, and now we're almost at 1,000 students, and we hope that trend continues.
Okay.
All right.
So we pulled what I hope are highlights from the budget book that you have in front of you. I'm happy to share these slides with you. The content should be identical, but this is meant to give you a summary of how we got here tonight and what some of the numbers mean to us, and how we are thinking about them. So
So how do we get here? How did we come here tonight? For us, it is always budgeting season. We never really take a day off from stewarding the resources that the city of Salem gives to us. But in earnest, we begin after the October 1 census. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education says October 1 is the day, whoever is enrolled, those are your students. And that is really important because that's what our funding is going to be based on. So as the superintendent said, we did see an uptick in enrollment in the October 1 census, and that is great news. It is great news because that brings revenue. So while the city of Salem is our largest funder, and so it is important that we come and have an open dialogue with you, thank you for the time here tonight and for the conversation that will follow. The Chapter 70 funding from the state is our next largest allocation. And so what our student population looks like really does drive so much of the conversations that begin in the fall. So from October, we then ask principals to begin with their teams, with their school communities, to identify what is working this year and what do they think it will mean for next year. That happens before the end of the calendar year. And in January, we really begin a reflective process where we ask them, okay, where are we? Where do we need to go? What are your priorities going to be next year? They are meeting with their instructional leadership teams, their school site councils throughout February, and they're preparing to make proposals to the finance subcommittee of the school committee, which happens throughout February and March. In April, we put all that together into a proposal for the full the full school committee to consider. We do that after we know what Chapter 70 is likely to be, which is based on our October 1 enrollment, and that is usually reported in the governor's budget proposal in January. When we put our proposal together, we had the House budget, but we didn't yet have the Senate budget. But it stayed pretty steady. There was a slight uptick in our Chapter 70. I'll talk about that in a minute. So we spend April really talking with the full school committee about what the proposal is. We have a public hearing, and of course, we're available for small forums, large forums. We have an email and lots of ways for folks to be in touch with us, and that culminated at the end of April with a vote. So the school committee has recommended this proposal for your consideration tonight. Sent it to City Hall on May 2, when I'm going to say it was, 72 degrees cooler than it is right now. And here we are tonight. So as you know, a budget is a story of revenue and expense. And as the superintendent said, this is a complicated year. Our revenue is growing. So when Chapter 70 grows, our revenue grows. This year, our October 1 enrollment was 3,811 students. Last year, the October 1 enrollment was 3,709. Now, if you did a close read of the budget book and you saw a larger enrollment cited, it's because our enrollment tends to grow all year, but our official enrollment is that 10-1. So our Chapter 70 is increasing this year. It is likely to be $29,642,316. That is about $2 million more than what it was last year. So how do they calculate that? Every district has a foundation budget. That is what the state estimates it will cost to educate our specific students. They look at the number of students we have, they look at the demographics of our students, and then they compare that against some cost drivers that they've identified. Professional development, teacher compensation, special education, building maintenance, etc. They put together what they estimate to be the costs of educating our students, and that is what they think will cost Salem to provide an adequate education for our students. Then they look and they see what they think Salem can afford to pay. And that is our required local contribution. So it's basically a measure of local tax revenue that the city can reasonably raise and dedicate to the operation of the schools. And the difference is our Chapter 70 aid. So it's good news that our Chapter 70 is increasing. However, at the same time, the state's estimate of what our local contribution should be is also very rapidly increasing. We're getting more Chapter 70 revenue, but they also assume that we can assume a larger share of our overall budget. So a mixed picture. Other things to note on this slide, the superintendent did reference that ESSER is sunsetting. So Salem received a little over $15 million that were mostly unrestricted to help with student recovery. I think I was here a few months ago talking about how we wanted to use that for some HVAC investments. But this money has supported a wide range of programming, staff, and support. And there is no replacement for that money. So our Chapter 70 is up. We're getting a little bit more in the charter reimbursement. However, Salem's local contribution is growing and there's no more relief. On top of that, expenses are rising rapidly. So as our elected leaders, you know as well as any that when the diversity of a community increases, the cultural wealth of our community increases, the vibrancy of our community increases, but also the range of what students need in our buildings as our population grows, that also increases. We have seen an increase in students with intensive needs, with developmental delays, and an increase in students whose needs are best served by out-of-district placements. So this year we're up by 10, and those are very costly. Now they're the right thing to do when we can't meet a student's needs, but nonetheless, they are quite expensive. Our fixed costs are increasing dramatically, and I'll talk more about that. Utilities, transportation, special ed tuition, that is increasing. Those are increasing at a very rapid clip. More to come on that. And most of our employees are represented by unions that are at the table. So 73% of our employees are either members of the Salem Teachers Union or the Paraprofessionals Union, and so we are negotiating with them. We heard from the community a desire to increase compensation. We've looked at our neighboring districts and see that we are on the lower end. So there is a desire to increase employee compensation, but all of that, of course, has to be weighed against the revenue that we have, the rising expenses, and what we can afford. So it is a complicated year. So what we are proposing for FY25, what the school committee has approved, is an appropriation of the $74 million, which is a 4.83% increase over last year. That is an extraordinarily generous increase from the city of Salem, larger than our increases have been on average. About 74% of those costs are personnel and 26% are non-personnel. That is a reflection, I think, of our rapidly growing non-personnel expenses. Generally, our personnel is between like 75% and 80%. So the fact that it's 74% is actually a reflection of our non-personnel expenses growing very rapidly. And you can see they increased by about 17% in the coming year. I believe you have our full budget book, but if you didn't, it is available on our website. So how did we put this together? The superintendent talked about our commitment to equity, our North Star, and our strategic priorities, and also really putting students first. So even as we navigate this complex funding, our increasing expenses, we want to make sure that we are putting student needs first. So in some instances, we are recommending new positions. There are 10 new positions being recommended to be added to the general fund budget this year. Those are 10 actual new positions, like the early childhood classroom. We're also adding some of the previously funded ESSER positions because we determined that those were too important to the success of our students to let them go just because the funding is sunsetting. But for as many ESSER positions as we are adding onto the general fund, we are discontinuing other positions that were always anticipated to be temporary positions, that were always acknowledged to be grant funded, that would have a finite end. So there will be 23 ESSER funded positions that will go away. And we're also eliminating 16 general fund positions to make room for the positions that we're adding onto the general fund. This is probably too small to read, but it lays out the positions that are being eliminated from the general fund, which are 16, and the positions that are being eliminated from ESSER or other grants. In most instances, the positions that are ESSER funded are things like paraprofessionals that have served as lunch paraprofessionals, tutors. There has been a specialist teacher, which actually, this is outdated, I apologize, we have restored that position within the final total. The ECC specialist teacher, we have restored. So I apologize that that's there. And we restored that after hearing at the community hearing that they couldn't do without that position. That person was good for kids, was providing prep time for teachers, that they really needed that. So that is, in fact, when I circulate these slides, that will be correct. Yeah, so those are the ESSER eliminations. The on the left-hand side are the positions from the general fund. So these are, in most instances, right sizing to the students that are enrolled. And what I mean by that is, for example, at Horace Mann, there is a 5th grade bubble. So they have 3 5th grade classes, but they have 2 at the other grade level. So they will eliminate a 5th grade position. In nearly, and the superintendent, correct me if I have this wrong, in nearly every instance, if a teacher wants to stay and their position is being eliminated, there is a position for them in the Salem Public Schools. Would you like to add anything? Because so many of these are school-based, we wanted to make sure that they were not exclusively school-based, so we have eliminated 2 positions at the central office as well. Here are the positions that are being added onto the general fund. Building-based substitutes. We have heard from teachers and from principals alike that having a substitute in the building, just given the absenteeism that we've seen because people have COVID or for whatever else, just makes it much easier to have someone on site who knows the kids. We're maintaining the pre-K positions at Bates and Horace Mann. These were ESSER-funded positions. We're expanding the Bentley dual language program to pre-K. We're adding a multilingual teacher at Carleton, 0.5, and the other 0.5 will be a reading specialist, so it'll be a 1 full person, but it's really to meet the needs of the growing ML population. We see that need at New Liberty, at Collins, and then adding the classroom at ECC, adding more special ed classrooms at Witchcraft, and then, I skipped Saltonstall. They have a health teacher who's funded on ESSER. And then at the central office, these were, the MSBA liaison is stewarding our building project, and a 0.5 float nurse who was funded by a grant that has ended. So those are not new people, but those are new to the general fund. And then we did, and this I know you really can't read, so apologies for that. We did allow principals to then say, okay, what do they need in their building? What would they swap in their building? So a good example that the superintendent already referenced is at Horace Mann, for example, they're swapping several different positions in order to upgrade their library paraprofessional from a paraprofessional to a digital learning specialist. Saltonstall, they have a hall monitor position that will become an engagement specialist. So these were things that the principal and their school community said, this is what we need in this building. Okay, so other rising costs that are not people. They are, you've heard this from me before, transportation, tuition, utilities, and then, of course, the personnel increases, which I know is a personnel cost, but I think it would not be, not mentioning it here, I think would be inappropriate. So we, in the year ahead, expect our transportation costs to go up by about 21%. This is largely specialized transportation, so transportation for our students experiencing homelessness. We have received funds from the state that has subsidized our homeless transportation this year, and those funds are ending, partly because the shelter at the Bates complex is closed. We will no longer have access to those funds. Our costs for special ed transportation are going up in and out of district, and so that is partially contributing to our rising transportation costs. And you'll see in a moment, our regular day, so the bus routes, just that pick kids up in the morning and drop them off at school, pick them up at school and drop them off at home, that's going up slightly, largely due to the cost of bus monitors, but I'll say more about that in a moment. Our special ed tuitions are going up pretty dramatically, and this is the second year in a row. So you might remember last year there were 14% increases in the tuitions for private placements for children who attend private placements outside of the district. This year, the tuitions are going up between 4.69% and 14%. The costs are going up, and the numbers of students needing placements outside of the district are going up. This is a significant driver of our budget increase. Our utilities are also going up. I'll say more about that in a moment, but we have, and you probably know this, we have had, as a city, we've been locked into a rate for several years for our electricity, and that has been negotiated, and we got a good deal, which I'll say more about that in a moment. But it will be an increase over what we signed on to several years ago. And then, of course, the personnel increases that will come when we settle our contracts. So these are our costs that are rising pretty dramatically. This is what the transportation costs look like. At the top is the regular day. So the monitors are, the cost of monitors is going up pretty significantly. I should say monitors make $155 a day. So I certainly do not begrudge them for that salary. However, it's a 50% increase over what it is now, and they have to work longer, partly because our bus company is having a hard time finding monitors, so they have to bring them to Salem, which extends the number of hours they work. Certainly not, an outrageous expense, but it is adding to our overall costs, as well as there is a cost escalator in our contract. We have another 2 years with our NRT bus contract. For special ed costs for out of district look somewhat level. That's the gray bar. Our rates are going up, but the number of students participating in that transportation seems to be leveling off. We are participating in a regional collaboration, and so we'll be able to share vans. So we're anticipating a level for out of district. Homeless transportation without the state subsidy, we expect about a $400,000 jump in our cost. In district, special ed transportation is going up. It did increase, in fact, this year, partly because we had to add more vans, including a wheelchair van. Obviously, the children's safety getting to school is very important to us. This is a rising cost. I included athletics here, even though it's mostly level, just because this is what we spend in transportation. Here's what our utility bills look like. So we really hope that the investments that we are making, that you all have approved with our IVAC and ESSER grants, will help us to contain our utilities usage. But on the left-hand side, you can see that our electricity has just been a steady uptick. We are planning to add new boilers and new controls at Witchcraft and Bates. And later in our capital request, you'll see more projects that will help us improve efficiency in our buildings. And so we hope to be able to contain these energy costs. Just a word about the energy contract. Current contract has saved the city and schools about $869,000 in calendar year 2023 compared to what National Grid's basic rate was. So that contract expires in December of 2024. New supply rate will be roughly 20% more, but we still estimate a $630,000 savings compared again to National Grid's basic rate. So we expect to spend a little bit more, but hopefully use a little bit less. Nonetheless, our electricity budget we expect will be $1.27 million, anticipating a half year, the 20% increase. So next year, we'll be back planning for the full 20% increase that we're told. Okay, tuitions. So this is what our hockey stick is what our special ed tuitions look like for the Salem Public Schools. So you can see over the last several years, this is what our actual spending has been. So you might recall that the state provides a program called Circuit Breaker, where they reimburse the district for costs above an extraordinary threshold, which is usually about $50,000. So after we take out the circuit breaker money, which is around $2 million a year, this is what our costs look like. And this is a reflection of more students going out of district and 2 years of significant increases. So all that to say, our expenses actually will outpace our very generous appropriation of $74 million. And so in the year ahead, we're planning to use additional one-time revenue of about $5.5 million. So that includes our circuit breaker, which it's a little bit of a misnomer. We do get circuit breaker every year, but that's an annual revenue outside of our appropriation. School choice. So we have students who choose to come to Salem, who live in other places. They pay tuition to come here. We expect about $493,000 in school choice. Other annual revenue, we rent out our spaces. We rent space to the Boys and Girls Club. We have different sources of revenue. That's about 184. We have funds left in our footprint account. And we expect to tuition in students into Salem Prep, which is different from school choice. But we are able to take students into our therapeutic day school. We have not done so in the last couple of years, but we're planning to recruit more students and believe that we can meet that tuition level. We also will use $700,000 in ESSER money that we were planning to use in this fiscal year as one-time money to prepay some tuitions, and we're making cuts this year and trying to be as efficient as possible. We will use the last of the emergency migrant funding that has subsidized our homeless transportation, and we are proposing to use 40% of what we have in our cash reserves for circuit breaker and school choice. What that is it is considered best practice to have up to a year of circuit breaker funds in reserve. And we also have several years of accumulated school choice revenue that we haven't been spending. So we're proposing to dip into this because our actual costs exceed that $74 million. Our actual costs in the year ahead will be just north of $80 million. That's after making the cuts that we have made and then putting together all the revenue, the components of our revenue. So we are grateful for Salem's generosity and couldn't do it without you. And in the year ahead, we will be looking at other ways that we can close that gap between our appropriation and our expenses. There's more slides. This is what our recommended budget looks like. We have 18 cost centers, and you can see, I did not note what page this was in the budget, but this is directly from the budget book. You can note the growth of the costs over time. This is what it looks like by cost center. Wow, I have several more slides. How did I forget that? And you can see here that the largest cost center is Salem High School, followed by our special education department and our operations and maintenance department. Our utilities are budgeted to our operations and maintenance. That's what's driving that. Our special education includes the tuitions and the in and out of district transportation. And the high school includes all of the costs of running our largest school in the district, as well as athletics. So that is what it looks like. By cost center, I offered this. These are all charts from the budget book, but just so you could see district-wide supports, that large gray slice, those are departments that support schools, that work directly with schools, like transportation, like operations, like our multilingual department, IT, but are not schools. So when we break down the money, 63% of the money goes to schools, 37% goes to the departments that support schools. And it's similar, our largest schools have the largest budget. So Salem High has the largest share, followed by Collins, and then Witchcraft. This is what makes up that district-wide gray slice: operations and maintenance, district administration, which is HR, payroll, superintendent's office, business office. Regular day is our academics, special education, multilingual learner, student and family supports, and IT. And then this is what it looks like for the schools. And this really is my last slide before I go into capital. We have more slides, but I'm sorry, not done. This is what it looks like with the schools. So before we go to capital, did one of you want to jump in? Okay. So these are our capital requests this year. Do you want to pause before we go here?
Yeah, I was just thinking, well, first of all, that was all just you and your educators and the teams at all your schools and in your school, in the Salem Public School System. It's incredibly impressive, the work that you all do, very much so. And this was a fantastic presentation. And I would think, to ask questions about the budget, and then we would vote on that, and then we will go over to the capital improvements, if that works for you as well. Okay, great. Yes, thank you for that. And yes, so like I had said, it is section, just for your review, it's section 26 in the small tabs. That is a one-page document that we would be voting on. And the slide presentation was section 4 of the large tab section in the front. And also, I was wondering if this summary would be available to send out, and I can share it with the counselors and everything. So that would be great. Okay, so questions, Councillor Stott?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Through you, just a few comments, maybe kind of one question, but I think as I had the questions during your presentation, you answered a lot of them. So thank you. Very thorough presentation, which I think speaks to the large timeline that you all had preparing this, and all of the feedback and community input and the work that the school committee and the school committee members have done to get this together and present it to us this evening, really buttoned up. Very much appreciate it. I also very much appreciate the work that the Salem Public Schools do. And I think that's a great idea for you to come back, because I have a lot of other questions, but probably not so much budget related. So I just wanted to have a few budget related questions. First one was pre-K ESSER related. So I will start it off by saying I very, very, very much appreciate that Salem took this as a priority to use the ESSER funds to fund a pre-K program within the city. And not just that, but is now taking it a priority to ensure that we can continue it past the funding of ESSER. I was confused because we have I think from somebody reading, a member of the public, we have something called the Early Childhood Center, but that is not our pre-K program that we're speaking of, if I understand correctly. It looks like the pre-K classrooms are now baked into the schools that have, is that correct?
Yeah, so we have, there's a number of classes that we've added that are at the early child, not to confuse you, that are at the Early Childhood Center, but we also added 4 classes, 2 debates and 2 to Horace Mann, that were added in those 2 buildings, and we are adding an additional classroom at Bentley this upcoming school year to feed into the dual language program. So we have, in the last 3 years, we have added over 100 new pre-K seats for 4-year-olds. And then we have added some 3-year-old seats, but the majority have been for 4-year-olds. We are funding that out next year, no longer ESSER, but we are using school choice dollars as the sustainable mechanism, because we do have about 50 students every year who come into the district from other communities, and so that's how we're using the funding. That's how we're funding pre-K moving forward. I am interested, and I think we all should be interested, on the state's initiative to expand pre-K in gateway cities. We're already have it. I'd like to see what that funding looks like. I'd like to ask our former mayor what that will look like for us, because that could be a potential revenue source for us in the future, given that we already offer free pre-K, and that is something that they're looking to replicate, I think, by FY26 in all gateway cities. I think you all may have heard that announcement a few months ago, and I think we like to consider ourselves trailblazers in that area.
Right. Thank you. And a follow-up to that with the pre-K enrollment, were any students waitlisted, or was everyone that applied for a pre-K seat granted one?
So we think we're pretty saturated right now, because our pre-K work is not only the classes that are in the Salem Public Schools, but we've also subsidized partner programs. We work with Salem Community Child Care, Angela's Preschool, and the YMCA, and we just also were awarded a grant to bring in Pathways and what's the other one? Is it Ashley? Yeah, Ashley's into our portfolio as well. So there really isn't a wait list for families. That we think everybody who wants a seat can get a seat. In fact, we do have a few seats available right now for 4-year-olds in the Salem Public Schools. But through the partnership, every parent who wants a seat can get a seat.
Thank you. And if I may, just two more questions. Well, one is more of a comment on one chart that you didn't show. You showed a lot of charts, was the diversifying of the staff. And I just want to say, I appreciate that trend upward. I think that's very hard to do with certain requirements that you have, but I think it's great that it's going in the correct trend, because I think that's very important for students.
That will be in my State of the Schools. I promise you that. And
yes, that's where I saw it. Yes. So just a comment on that, and I appreciate that. So looking forward to that State of the Schools. And then my last kind of comment question of the 52% of non-personnel budget going to special education, it looks like with that hockey stick out of district services, really increasing the last 2 years. At what point do we look at, can we serve those in district for it to be cost effective?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We're still not, I mean, we're not where we were pre-COVID in terms of the number of kids going out of district. That being said, it's not about the number. It's actually because the cost has gone way up of tuitions. And so that's why the increase has been so great. We are talking to a lot of the local districts about how we can work together to offer programs and to regionalize. I do think that's something we can get better at, and we need to work. There are groups of us talking right now about how districts, North Shore districts, can work together to pool resources to create classes that might be a need. We don't have enough students, but across multiple districts there are enough students, and the cost would be less than going to an out-of-district school. And if there are places where we should be opening classes of our own, that is something we need to start, examine as well.
And if I could just add,
Sure.
The biggest jump in that special ed hockey stick budget chart is the out-of-district tuitions, the 14% increase 2 years in a row. We also are increasing our in-district costs. We've opened new classrooms just as we realize we need to meet wherever they are. But without question, the tuitions are the larger.
Councilor Masillo?
Thank you, Chair. I also really like the data that was presented with the breakdown of the demographics for students and teachers. I think that's really important. It was a good view. Just back to, I guess, the pre-K. I have so many questions, but I'm going to try and keep it budget related. If all the students right now can be taken care of in the pre-K program, why are we expanding to another classroom?
Well, because not all of them, there is a demand for dual language. First of all, we think it's a good pipeline into the program. And we want to attract more families to the dual language program, and we want kids speaking 2 languages earlier. And it is a balance, because while there is seats out in not all of them are Salem Public Schools seats, and we do think that there is more demand for certain types of seats in the Salem Public Schools, like dual language. And we've heard from parents that they wanted that option, so that's why we may end up actually closing a classroom if we don't think that there is, if it ends up that there isn't that demand, and that's one of the things we're monitoring carefully. But we heard such interest in the dual language seats, and best practice for successful dual language programs is you get the kids in as early as possible, and so that's one of the reasons we're opening specifically that. But I think that's, and one of the things that Sarah Roy from the mayor's office, the new head of the Children's Alliance, that's one thing we need to look at is what's the appropriate number of seats for us to have versus community partners. And so in the end, we may end up closing a classroom if the demand isn't there. Right now, it looks like there's, when we look at applications for next year, it looks like we are pretty saturated, but we'll see.
Along those same lines for the dual language program, I remember from its original incantation in the Federal Street School. It's a great program. How much more does it cost per student in that program? Just generally.
It doesn't actually cost that much more. The only thing that we do differently is we do have an additional paraprofessional in the first grade for that classroom, because what happens is we over-enroll kindergarten because with attrition, it becomes hard to fill dual language classes as the kids get older, and we can really only fill it with Spanish dominant students who come into the district. If you're not Spanish dominant, it's hard to get into a dual language program, like if you're an English dominant speaker later on. So we over-enroll early on with the idea that there'll be attrition over time. So the only additional cost is we have an extra paraprofessional in the first grade classes. The other thing that's challenging is it's not exactly we've had to bring teachers from Spain, actually, although I'd like to bring them from other countries as well. We struggle to find teachers, not that are bilingual, but that can actually teach in Spanish, and we do subsidize some of that, helping them get their paperwork. So there's a cost to that because the certification process is really difficult, and we do not have enough teachers. Amanda Campbell on the school committee can talk about this because this is her day job in Lynn, because she runs the dual language program in Lynn. That's another, I guess, cost, because we are forced to bring teachers from other places because again, just because I can speak Spanish, but nobody would want me teaching their child in Spanish. I'm just not strong enough. And just because you can teach like Spanish at the high school doesn't mean you can teach content in Spanish. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges we run into.
Okay. You had mentioned that you're seeing kids coming in at age 3 entering the system with more complex issues. Is that more than you were seeing entering at kindergarten?
Yeah, well,
or is it
2 months, 2 years, 9 months? It's kids who are coming in through early intervention, and we are seeing more children than we have historically coming in with IEPs. I don't think that's super surprising given what's happened the last few years, but it is a cost driver because we've had to open additional classrooms. Elizabeth spoke to opening additional classrooms at the ECC. The ECC was always intended to be the program where we would have preschool students with IEPs, and the number of classrooms have increased that we've had to open because of the number of students being identified earlier than ever before who have IEPs, and we have an obligation to serve them. And then to determine where the best, are they going to continue in the Salem Public Schools? Will they go to an out-of-district placement? Do they go into a substantially separate class? But those numbers are skyrocketing in terms of identified students. I think a lot of it has to do with the pandemic, but more and more pediatricians are identifying kids for services. The increased high needs of the population. We have students moving in from other countries that have some significant needs as well, and so that's what we mean by that.
And the only thing I think I would add is 3-year-olds are not always on our radar, whereas 5-year-olds usually are. Mm-hmm. So we can plan for
Okay. And then you had mentioned that you're seeing the fruits of the pre-K program in the first grade now. Can you mention one or two things, like where's the growth, or where's...
I think we see more kids who are kindergarten ready on the indicators that we use. We give an assessment internally called the STAR assessment. We have more kindergarteners and first graders who are on grade level than previously in those than what we've had before. I think the best thing to do is talk to kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers about their experiences as well. I think they've communicated to us qualitatively that the students are more prepared, and they see big differences between the kids that are moving up from within the system than students who are coming in who have never been to school before. And, you know, the percentage of kids who have been in one of our programs now is, you know, I think close to 2/3 have been in a Salem Public Schools or partner program before they come in to kindergarten. And so those are just some of the examples. I think we want to get harder data than even that as kids move through. They're just not at the testing grades yet. They will be, and I think you will see that over the next 2 years as kids, once they get to third grade and they're taking the state assessment, I think we'll see, you know, the benefits of a pre-K program.
Okay.
Pre-K program.
One of the things you're losing in the ESSER is the tutors.
Mm-hmm.
How is that affecting the district?
Well, I mean, it's nice to have additional tutors who provide extra support. You know, we've used retired teachers in the past to provide that. I mean, that is going to be a loss in some of the schools, but we do feel like we have substantial staffing. I don't always think it's about more bodies, although it was helpful to have those bodies, especially right after the pandemic. And, you know, we do have a pretty strong complement of interventionists in schools who are trained educators who we're going to have to rely more on. And if we have additional funds to piece together, we can bring people back as tutors. But, you know, we went into this knowing we would only have them for the period of time that we had ESSER. And that was one of the recommended investments, was extra tutoring for kids post-pandemic.
Okay. I just wonder if there's still going to be a need. I mean, always, I guess.
There will be there'll definitely be a need. I also think we're lucky that we have good after-school partners, and they can also help step in. I think we could be more strategic with them, but yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was going to be a loss. It will be a loss, but unfortunately, we can't sustain all of that support.
Right. And finally, is transportation part of the foundation budget? Is that expense?
Well, transportation is above net school spending, so that's a city's responsibility, transportation. But because Salem spends above required contribution, you know, transportation, you know, that is an issue for here, but it isn't. Transportation is a city's responsibility above and beyond what's allocated for schools. What the minimum net school spending does not include transportation.
Okay. So even for the special education where you provide it, or
we can apply for circuit breaker funds for the
transportation.
Special education once across. That is a new development as of, I think, this year. So we do get some reimbursement for our special education.
And finally, because transportation, this always, it's always a question in my mind about neighborhood schools and school choice. And I think last year you said that there was going to be more thought put into that, or more research, and like, what have you learned? And
we have a great presentation for you on that, like that. Vanessa has done that, who runs transportation. We're in the midst of those conversations right now. There have been community conversations where the school committee has given me a very clear charge to examine the neighborhood school question and school choice, along with school configuration. So we've had 2 forums, and then we have one more next week that we're engaging families around. And so I think this is, I don't want to speak for the school committee, but I know this is a question they want to wrestle with. We are spending quite a bit more than we would have to. I mean, there's pros and cons to school choice, and I think all of you who have lived in the city for a while, many of you have children in the schools or did have children in the schools. There are definitely, that's a really important question to wrestle with, but we do have a lot of money tied up in transportation because of the school choice. You know, as you know, we have, 5 different buses or 6 different buses stopping at the same stop to pick up kids going across the city. Pros and cons to that, and it's empowering to have choice, but it comes at a financial cost as well. So I rest assured that the school committee has charged me with having that conversation, and I would anticipate you're going to hear some more dialogue about that, a lot more dialogue about that in the next year.
Yes, thank you. We certainly look forward to hearing more about that. And speaking of the school committee, I want to mention that school committee member Mary Manning is joined us tonight through this whole meeting. Thank you. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Merkel, through you to the superintendent's and assistants. I can't even say it. Thank you guys for being here. I have one question, budget related. When it comes to the grant awards, I understand we were awarded $13 million and change in FY24. Do you guys have any metric on the health of grant funding for 2025? I know that's a huge part of always trying to capture as much as we can. I understand that the food insecurity infrastructure grant did not come back up. Is that possibly on the horizon for 2025?
I don't know if that specific grant is on the horizon for 2025, but I'd be glad to investigate that because we really appreciated that. I do know that some of our entitlement grants are projected to decrease somewhat, so we're expecting about $25,000 less in Title I, which is an entitlement grant. In terms of other competitive grants, we are very aggressive at seeking competitive grants and so far have been successful, so I don't anticipate that would change, but I don't have much more.
No, I mean, I think we are always looking for ways to be, there's a lot out there for schools, and especially since ESSER is going away, that's we see the need to try to free up people's time to be able to write. We don't have a full-time grant writer, but we're trying to free people plates up who can do, there's a lot available to schools, especially high-need schools like ourselves, that are both through the Department of Education, but federal and other competitive grants. I think we could continue to do a better job of that, and we're going to need to as things get tighter for us. Not that we were just sitting back and not applying for things before, but I think more so than ever, we're interested in figuring out how a lot of it is just getting the grants, like applications out there, and we have all the markers of a district that people want to fund and support, and so I can assure you be aggressive.
Awesome. And my last comment would be just an operational question. When it comes to grants in general, does each school have the autonomy to apply for grants, or is there someone overseeing that in the administration to make sure that we do capture where there's an opportunity?
I would say yes and no. And the yes part is, yes, we have a very entrepreneurial staff. We have department heads who are writing grants all the time. We have principals who are doing the same. We have a grants person who manages all the grants that come through the Salem Public Schools. So she is available to people who are considering applying for grants to support them, to help write them, and then to submit them, certainly to DESE, facing grant. I would say most people take advantage of that person and work closely with her, and she is very available to them. But does it happen that every once in a while there's a surprise grant that she didn't know about? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Chair Merkel, not being a member of the committee, through you to everyone at the table. you had mentioned the migrant families being an impact. I think, Mayor, you had mentioned in an email at one point that you had secured, or the city had secured 60 vouchers or vouchers for 60 families. Do you have an idea what percentage of the families will be staying in Salem?
I can get you the latest count. It's not all 60 by any means. It's a handful. Some of them are finding housing through the vouchers, and some of them are moving to other EA shelter sites. But not many are staying in Salem.
Yep. Can I ask some environmental utility questions? Okay. A couple of years ago, the city secured 2 PPAs, one for Collins, one for Saltonstall for solar PV. I'm assuming that those have already converted to a liability. Would always stress never to do a lease on solar. The legislature is now considering a bill to eliminate a lot of that kind of stuff. Way back when we purchased solar as part of the footprint deal, we got the donation of $1.7 million, which we put on the Bentley and the Witchcraft Heights School. And I don't know if this is a question for Anna or not, but we were to receive approximately $100,000 per year for 10 years on the SREC, Solar Renewable Energy Certificates. I was under the understanding that when we put those on the schools, having been one of the people who formulated the program, that those dollars would go to the school system. Is that true?
Counselor, I'd like to double check on that. I don't know if Elizabeth, if you know off the top of your head, I would want to check with Elizabeth and Neil just to confirm from an accounting perspective, confirming exactly where those are landing right now. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, that would be great if it was. With those panels that we own, 100% of the electricity is owned by Salem. With the PPAs, we only get a small discount, and it's an onerous contract. I do want to address the Amoresco deal. I voted for it only because we have an opt-out. I do feel that the city has in the past had a misconception that efficiency trumped sustainability. So getting a more efficient boiler may save some money, but the way the incentives work now, the way the efficiency of sustainable equipment like heat pumps and geothermal is that it's actually better immediately and long term to invest in those technologies. So I'm hoping that is the goal. It's also environmental benefit. And this isn't a budget thing, but the solar array on top of the Witchcraft Heights School, which Jenna Ide used to have on her, Zoom screen, is actually like a somewhat revolutionary design. And I don't know if it's possible. We had talked about doing this when the original program was going to be on the high school, but we couldn't put the panels on the high school because the roof couldn't support it, is having some kind of program where the kids could get on the roof and see the program and especially since we have the CTE program, it would really be great to have some way of safely bringing certain groups of kids up to see what we have up there. It's a pretty extraordinary design. I think it's the only one of its kind in the state right now, and I'm just encouraging that as another educational tool with the sustainability. And I'm not against going back to Amoresco. They're a really good company. I just think that we really need to convert. As you can tell in this room, we have no air, and if we had heat pumps, everyone would have a more productive evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the council? Okay, so what we are voting on is, like I said, a little different than the other departments. This is section 26. We only vote on the total appropriation amount. Sorry, Councilor Watson-Felt, we're on a shared screen, so I'm not seeing any hands raised. Let me raise the volume, and so you can speak. Could you try it now?
Just taking a few more minutes. I know we've been on for quite some time, and I really appreciate Dr. Strike and his team's time tonight, but I would love to ask just a couple questions. Through you, Chair, to Dr. Strike, how many members of the teachers in the pre-K program across the city are bilingual?
I don't know the answer offhand. We do have, I do know that like we have trained 50 staff across the system to we do have an incentive, a bilingual incentive in the Salem Public Schools that you can get an extra stipend and move up in the pay scale if you are deemed bilingual. You have to take a course and an assessment to show that. And we have about 50, is that right, Elizabeth? Who have passed that assessment in multiple languages. So I can't tell you exactly, but there are many, many other people who do speak other languages. The only class that's required in pre-K to be bilingual will be the new bilingual class at Bentley School, the teacher for that classroom.
Thank you. That's really, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I just, in my mind, with the mission and purpose of the pre-K program, I was just thinking that it might be very helpful in expanding that program, expanding that reach to ensure that there are some bilingual teachers in place to help those very young learners prepare for kindergarten. So that was the core of the question. Perhaps in future, maybe when we do the state of the school, you might be able to answer that question. That'd be wonderful to know. A second question, how many school choice students from outside of Salem are attending Salem schools? And it may be that I don't have the paperwork in front of me tonight because I'm traveling, so I appreciate everyone's patience on this. But I know you referenced approximately just over $400,000 in income, and I'm wondering how that equates to the number of students from outside of the city.
We send us about the same number as we receive, which is about 50 students. We have 50 students who come in through school choice at all grade levels, and then we send out about 50 students who choice out to other communities. So it's about 50-50.
Great. Thank you for that. I know that the Chapter 70 equation conversation has gone around and around the last number of years, and it's wonderful to see that there's been at least a little increase. And when Liz was talking through the concepts around Chapter 70's expectation that Salem is able to meet a higher bearing of the cost of students, I'm wondering if the Chapter 70 equation takes into account any increased cost due to inflation. So operating costs, how is that incorporated into that equation? You may not be able to answer, but if you are, I was just curious.
Anna, we're so lucky to have Anna here because she's one of the few people in the entire state that actually understand the Chapter 70 formula. So, and I mean that sincerely. So we'll pass it to Anna.
It might, maybe, hopefully I understand 90% of it, hopefully. But Council, your question about the inflation, there is a factor in the formula that's a statewide factor related to inflation, and that's capped. And so that has been a point of issue this current year for several communities because inflation has been higher than what that cap has been the past couple of years. And so that's been sort of suppressing aid that would otherwise ideally be flowing to those communities. On the ability to pay portion for Salem, that's sort of a separate component of the formula for all communities, and it basically looks at our property assessments and incomes. It doesn't otherwise, there isn't sort of a carved out inflation on that piece of it. It's assessment, property assessments and incomes. And that's the piece of the formula that's separate from just the separate inflation factor, where we think that element of the formula has not been reviewed since it went into effect. And we think it is sort of not evaluating Salem's true ability to pay based on those factors related to some other things that are happening in the formula. I'm hoping that answers the question. Inflation, I believe it's 4.5. It's around 4 or 4.5 that's capped. And so, of course, we're around 3% inflation, I believe, this year, but prior years were significantly above that, the cap. And so that's where there's some communities have been trying to push the state to waive that cap, but there hasn't been movement on that to date.
So this is exactly the point of my question. And I'm wondering if there's anything that the council can do with regards to advocating for any perhaps statewide change with regards to ensuring that the cap is addressed in a timely fashion. As we have all learned with Chapter 70, these things take time. And I would hate for us to fall even yet another number of years behind because their base, rate assessments aren't being raised across the state. Is there anything we can do?
I'm going to hand it back to Anna, but I think the legislature is aware of the inflationary problem because other districts have also reached out. So.
Oh, sorry, you dropped out, Mayor. I'm not sure. Did you finish your comment?
Yep.
Or did I lose you?
Died.
Okay.
And I'm happy to circulate the information that's been shared from other school committees with the legislators from those communities. If members of the council wanted to reach out as well to advocate. I'm also a realist about the legislature doing anything about it. So, yeah.
For sure. This next question, I'm hoping I captured appropriately. So if it's a little too complicated, we can skip it. But at first, I was going to say thank you to Councillor Stott for asking the question that she did with regards to meeting the needs of our special needs students. Within the in-district costs, are we matching that 14% out of district spending? Is that a level one for one similar to our choice in and versus choice out? Or if not, how do we build what we need to meet those students' needs? And how long do you estimate that might take to meet that 14% so we can regain those students?
That is a really good question. And I think what you're asking is, does our in-district programming meet the costs? Like, are we spending as much in-district as we are spending out of district? Is that the question?
That is basically the question. As I heard you say before, Liz, and thank you for all of your incredibly wonderful data. It sounded like you said 14% out district spending. And Councillor Stott's question was, are we, how do we sort of meet those needs? And I think my question is, what are we spending now vis-a-vis against that 14%? And then what can we do and how long might it take to build to meet that additional cost? If we wanted to do 100% meet the needs in Salem, what does that look like?
That's a very interesting question. And the true answer is I'll have to follow up with you about after I do some of that analysis. But the 14% is the cost increases that we've seen in the out of district tuitions. So it was a 14% increase last year and a 14% increase this year, but that's on tuitions. So I'd like to pull that apart a little bit while I'm looking at the numbers, but I would be glad to follow up with you on that.
That would be great. I just wonder, I'm certain it won't be done overnight, right? And so part of the question is kind of what is our long-term plan for, or do we have a long-term incremental plan to kind of try and meet those needs if we can average that 14% as an a year-over-year expectation, right?
Yeah, I think I think it's something we have to do some more studying, especially now post-pandemic as we assess the needs of our kids. There are certainly a lot of students that we do not have the resources or the services to serve within the district. But I do think it's worth careful examination as the costs have gone way up about to what extent can we offer programming that, that could keep students in district, keep them in their home community, which a lot of families want and is in the best interest of the child. It's just whether we have the ability to run, the type of programming that would meet some very involved and intense needs that some of those children have.
Sure. Yeah.
Actually,
thanks for
this is an incomplete answer, but if you look at the budget for the Salem Prep Therapeutic Day School, in some ways, so this is not the full answer to your question, which I would like to dig into, but in some ways, that offers a glimpse, I think, into what you're asking, because if we were to send those students out and not operate a therapeutic day school, we're pretty convinced it would cost us at least as much as what it costs us to run the Salem Prep School. So I'd like to take a broader look at the rest of our population,
Yeah.
but I know that for sure with our Salem Prep students.
It would be interesting only because if you take, like, for example, a 10-year trajectory approximate, right, there might be some opportunity to build toward something larger. And I just wanted to ask, if that was sort of in the zone. I know you all are putting out fires every day, and I deeply appreciate and respect all that you do. But I wanted to ask, so I appreciate your answer. Thank you. I have one last question, if it's all right, Chair. In addition to the telehealth services that are made available for mental health support services, Dr. Zreich, I ask this question every year. I'm so happy to see that the telehealth services are being maintained in the budget this year and continue to be offered to students. I have a question just with regards to how many of the mental health and social support service staff members within schools, physically in schools, are still being maintained in the budget, and how many of those, just out of curiosity, are being sourced from the community health center or through the community health center as a resource for sourcing?
Don't ask me why I know this answer off the top of my head, but I can tell you we did not cut any mental health professionals adjustment. We have 33 is the number I have stuck in my head. Personnel that are just, that does not include guidance counselors. That's just strictly folks that are doing adjustment counseling work that are Salem Public Schools employees. And your other question, so they're not affiliated with the community health center. We do have the community health center though present at Salem High School and at Collins Middle School. And there's other providers that come into our schools and provide services to kids through insurance. But we have, I believe, 33 full-time counselors work in the Salem Public Schools and that are not affiliated with any outside organization.
Very helpful. Thank you. So Dr. Zreich and team, I'm really looking forward to the annual State of the School session. Thank you so much for your time and all of the data supporting tonight's discussion. I'm all set, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Watson-Felt. Appreciate you coming through and glad we caught you out there. Any other questions from the councilors regarding the budget? Okay. Great. So, Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I would like to recommend approval for the Salem Public Schools total appropriation of $74,592,616.
Second.
Councilor Stott moves to recommend approval of the total appropriation for the Salem Public Schools in the amount of $74,592,616, seconded by Councilor Posnewski. All those in favor? Let the record show I saw 4 hands plus my own, so the matter carries 5-0.
Appreciate the support.
So next we are moving on to the capital improvement plan. And this is back in the larger tab 7 towards the front of the book. And we can go to page 259. This is the section that has the 5-year capital plan, all funds, as opposed to just the capital plan by department. So this way we can see some of the larger future year projects that are listed, and also of note, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Anna, but I believe these do not include the new high school, and even without including that, there are some larger future year projects listed. So again, that's on, starts on page 259 and continues on to 260. So, yes, I'll let
So I
you take
did
it.
add just a slide that lists the requests, but it does appear that my computer is about to die. So since you have them in front of you, I'm not going to share my screen. But we'll be, I believe, looking at the same thing. So we are requesting just about $2.6 million this year in capital requests, $2,659,328. Many of these projects are the result of prior studies or analysis that have been coming to fruition, including the last request in the document that I'm looking at, which is the $500,000 for playgrounds, and just going in reverse order, is from our playground audit that was done in 2022, which identified the Bates Kindergarten Playground as the second playground in the most dire need of repair and renovation after the Witchcraft Playground. I'm pleased to say the Witchcraft Playground funds have been previously allocated by the City of Salem, and the contract, I believe, was signed today with the contractors to build that this summer. So this $500,000 request is for the Bates Kindergarten Playground, and we prioritize that because that was identified as the second most pressing playground in the City of Salem. Several of the other requests, including the controls, the weatherization, infiltration reductions for all schools, the lighting, were identified through our ESCO process as ways to both reduce our consumption and become more efficient. We are very excited about the controls in particular, because we do think part of the reason why our costs have been going up over these last years is that we don't have full control over when the heat and air conditioning turns on in the buildings. And so we believe this will help us contain our usage and cost. Weatherization and infiltration reductions, we think will make the buildings tighter. Lighting, we think will make the buildings more energy efficient. So those are not insignificant costs that were lifted up by the ESCO project as significant needs for the district. Safety and security will help us to make sure that we have the locks that we need, the cameras that we need, and are able to keep our buildings tight and safe for children. And then the generators, this is for a generator at Bates, which doesn't have one. So if they lose power, we've been renting a generator. And the last, although technically first, is the ARPA funds to support chiller repairs at Salt and Stalls and Collins. This will not replace the chillers, but it will bring those to full, we hope, working capacity. So those are the first set. I realized I skipped over the IT and ADA, so apologies for that. There is an IT request to replace staff devices. There's an IT request to replace student devices. We do everything on devices now, and most of our devices are over 8 years old. And so they don't last forever. And so we're grateful to begin building a cycle where we can replace them. And the last is ADA repairs to ensure that our buildings continue to be accessible to residents and students wherever they come to us.
Great. Yes, thank you. Any requests for comment or questions from the council? Great. Again, let me just check in with Councillor Watson-Felt. Make sure I am not.
All good here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I believe wraps it up for tonight. Again, thank you to everyone, the schools, the school committee, both of you, the educators, the teams, the workforce. Incredible work that you're doing. It's invaluable. I can't even imagine trying to do what you all do. And thank you. It's very much appreciated. And thank you all. And of course, for all our budget hearings, thank you to Anna Friedman for your leadership here with the budget, and Mayor Pangallo, and appreciate it. Have a good night. And one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Okay, meeting is adjourned.